Wars is part of the Rippin' Podcast Network. In this episode of Cardboard Wars, hosts Ben Ripping and Kevin Rips dive into the storied history of the Seattle Seahawks, outlining their rise from an expansion team to an NFL powerhouse. The discussion covers the team's origins, its passionate fan base, iconic coaches, and strategic decisions that led to their success over the years. Ben and Kevin highlight how the Seahawks became a cultural icon in the Pacific Northwest and a formidable force in professional football. So sit back and enjoy this episode of Cardboard Wars.
It is 1974. The NFL is expanding again. The league has grown wealthy and confident, but they're still cautious. Expansion teams seem to fail more often than they actually succeed. Cities are fighting for the next franchise. Owners are worrying about dilution. The next city is not an obvious choice, but one place is fighting harder than everyone else. And it's a place that rains, it's cold, it's wet for half of the year, and it's far away from the East Coast powerhouses that are currently dominating the NFL. This city has no NFL legacy at all. It's somewhere in something entirely different, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, Seattle. And Seattle didn't have any of those things you just mentioned, but they had something else. Seattle had growth. Seattle had money, Boeing. They had a population that they believed is overlooked, a civic hunger to prove that it belongs on the national stage with the other big cities. When the NFL finally awards Seattle a franchise, to be honest, expectations were low. Expansion teams are supposed to lose. They're supposed to struggle quietly. They're supposed to wait. But, Seahawks, they were never very good at waiting.
Well, sometimes they wait to score until the third and fourth quarter. I know that about them. From the moment that the franchise is announced, the Seahawks are different. The branding is nautical, of all things. A regional power crowd that becomes the fans. It's an unapologetically Pacific Northwest blue, green, and silver, and a bird that looks like it's always moving forward. This is not a logo for a team that's designed to blend in.
And nobody knows this yet, but this franchise will eventually become one of the loudest, most defensive-minded, culturally distinct teams in the NFL. Nobody knows that it's going to win a Super Bowl by humiliation. We'll talk about that later. No one knows it's going to change how literally the noise of a crowd is measured. But the groundwork is already there.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cardboard Wars. Today, your co-host, Ben Rippin, is joined by his friend, Kevin Rips. We are here to talk about the history of sports, the players that we've all followed and looked up to our entire lives, and the cards that adorn them. We study history, sports cards, and sports. And today, we're studying the team that resides in the state that I was born and currently live. Kevin, you ready to talk about the Seattle Seahawks?
I'm ready, Ben. Let's do it.
The Seahawks play their first game in 1976 at the Kingdome. The building If you haven't been there, it's or was concrete, functional, and it was loud in a way that nobody would appreciate yet. The team, though, is thin. Expansion drafts are a little bit brutal. The talent is scattered, and early on, the losses start to pile up. Kevin, the Kingdom was where I saw my first professional sports game. It's also where I saw Monster Truck Rally, which we talked about early on in our podcast, because they featured quad wars and other cool things. It's also where wrestlers got to wrestle. And this is my town and my home. So I'm excited today to talk about the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, man, what a franchise. You know, in true Seattle Seahawk fashion, something unusual happens. The attendance is strong immediately. Fans show up early. They stay late. They shout. They're loud. They boo. They boo mistakes. They're not acting like new or, if you will, expansion fans. In fact, opposing quarterbacks began to complain about the noise within the first few years.
Bunch of wimps. See, even though the Seahawks weren't winning early on, they weren't ignored. By 1980, Seattle was already gaining a reputation as an uncomfortable place to play. Coming from a guy who lives there, it's also an uncomfortable place to live sometimes. One opposing coach is quoted as saying, "It feels like the crowd is actually on the field with you."
And in 1983, the Seahawks finally break through. Under head coach Chuck Knox and quarterback Dave Craig, they reached the playoffs for the first time. They beat the Denver Broncos. In fact, by the way, that sounds familiar now that I'm saying that, in the wild card round. Then they beat the Dolphins in the divisional round. This is no fluke, Ben. In fact, it's a statement.
Here's the call.
Offsides, defense decline to game.
That's it. Seahawks are in the playoffs. 24-6, they defeat New England.
Yeah, I was in, don't laugh at me, Kevin, but I was in 4-H. You know, that's in schools when you got to raise the animals and do that kind of stuff. And I raised a sheep, which I know is going to get a ridiculous amount of jokes from.
I'm holding my jokes right now.
From the Ripping crew and all of the Cardboard Wars fans. So I raised a sheep and I brought him to the Evergreen State Fair, and Dave Craig was walking around in the barns and petted my sheep. The problem was I had just got done perfectly grooming this sheep's wool, and he sticks his dirty fingers inside the wool, and I had to go back and fix it. It was my first meeting ever of anybody that was somewhat famous. Thanks, Dave, for screwing up my sheep wool. Back on task, Kev. Seattle finishes 1983 with a record of 12-4. It's one of the fastest turnarounds by an expansion franchise in NFL history, and everybody in the league starting to notice the Seattle Seahawks. The next decade is really defined by inconsistency. The Seahawks are competitive, sometimes very good, but rarely truly elite. They produce stars, Kurt Warner, Steve Largent, by the way, one of my favorite cards, which top value in a PSA 10 is like 10 grand. Kenny Easley, Brian Bosworth, everyone. Players who earn respect across the league.
Ben, did you ever see that movie with Zach Galifianakis? I can't believe The Hangover. Did you ever see that movie?
Did I see The Hangover? My life is a gigantic hangover movie. It's usually me missing the tooth and waking up with a baby.
You know that scene where Zach Galifianakis is like doing all the math equations and numbers are just running by his head.
Yeah.
That's how I felt with sheep jokes a minute ago.
Please carry on. On task.
Steve Largent becomes
bad. That was so bad.
Steve Largent just became the face of the franchise. I mean, when that guy retired in 1989, he actually goes out holding NFL records for receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. Now, we all know Jerry Rice later surpasses him, but Largent set the standard, man.
Craig Largent, that's it. You'll hear it now. The 128th consecutive game in which he's caught at least one pass, breaking the record of Harold Carmichael. They'll stop the game for a brief ceremony, and let's listen to the crowd. It happens at the age of 32, and the ball will be presented to Pete Elliott, the director of the Hall of Fame. There's Harold Carmichael on the right, Pete Elliott in the middle. That ball will be placed in the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio.
Jerry Rice, another one of my favorite cards to own and collect, his rookie card. Hey, despite individual excellence of some of these top players, the team struggles with continuity. Ownership uncertainty is kind of looming over the franchise. Coaches are rotating in and out. Divisions, Kevin, change, which is why they ended up with the Broncos, and as we referenced earlier, and Seahawks bounce between conferences. The team never actually collapses, but it also isn't ascending during that time.
Yeah, by the late 90s, the danger's not losing seasons. It's really the visibility. And then the franchise is saved by somebody who understands Seattle better than the league does.
In 1997, another good year, rumors are swirling that the Seahawks could be leaving Seattle, kind of like our Sonics did. The Kingdom, where they were playing, is outdated. Ownership is unsettled. Enters somebody very important to Seattle sports history, Paul Allen.
And then there was our hero. Paul Allen stepped up in a way that I don't think anybody quite realizes.
First of all, let me say that I am thrilled and honored to be part of maintaining the proud tradition of professional football in Seattle.
Yeah, Allen, Seattle native, obviously Microsoft co-founder, one of the richest men in the world, and he makes a promise, and that promise is simply the Seahawks will stay in Seattle.
Allen helps to finance a new stadium, but this is not just a building, it's an acoustic weapon. The design of the new stadium actually traps sound. It reflects it back onto the field. Engineers later measure the decibel levels that rival, get this, Kevin, jet engines.
That's insane. Seattle fans, of course, like they embrace it, right? Noise actually becomes their identity. The opposing team's false starts increase. The officials notice. Quarterbacks struggle. The Seahawks are no longer just loud. They're strategically loud.
Then under head coach Mike Holmgren, the Seattle Seahawks reached their first Super Bowl in the 2005 season.
The Detroit River bordering downtown Detroit, Michigan on this 30-degree early evening. And the Lombardi Trophy will be awarded tonight at Ford Field as the Seattle Seahawks get ready to face the Pittsburgh Steelers for the championship of the National Football League.
Sean Alexander wins the league MVP. Seattle finishes 13-3.
That Super Bowl ended in controversy, by the way. Penalties, missed call, some lingering resentment. Seattle lost to Pittsburgh. But the narrative changed.
Yeah, the Seahawks are no longer an expansion story. They're actually a contender. In 2010, the Seahawks hire Pete Carroll, and he arrives with some energy, some optimism, and a philosophy that says we are going to compete. In fact, he says always compete. That vision, Kevin, of seeing him standing on the sidelines with his clipboard or whatever it is, like ingrained in my mind of like a coach that you actually remember how he looks and how he acts on the field.
Yeah, man, I got to say, and I'm a card carrying member. I'm a Raiders fan, man. Always have been, always will be. So I'm really disappointed in how things worked out with Pete this year. But I got to tell you, man, I've always been a fan of Pete Carroll. That guy believes that culture precedes success. He lets players express themselves. He emphasizes speed. He builds depth. And I remember any Seattle fan and really NFL fan remembers this. In 2012, the Seattle Seahawks drafted quarterback in the 3rd round, Russell Wilson. Now, Russell's, he has a great college career, but everyone's like, he's too short. At least that's what the scouts said. He's too safe, like according to the critics.
Yeah, but Pete Carroll, he sees something else in Russell. Calm, precision. He sees him as a leader. Wilson wins the starting job of quarterback as a rookie, and the Seahawks begin to transform. They start building a defense that's fast, violent, confident. They call it the Legion of Boom. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. They talk, they hit, they start intimidating people. Russell Wilson, by the way, if you're thinking of like Seahawks sports cards that are worth something, he just had a card sell 2 months ago, a superfractor from 2012 for $56,000. Well, Russell Wilson's number 1 card, which I think is some sort of a shield or the Seahawks logo on a card, is his National Treasures 49 card sold in 2020 for $72,500 and a PSA 10. Pretty good, Kev.
That's really good, man. In 2013, this Legion of Boom, Seattle allows get this, 231 points all season. That's the fewest in the NFL. They lead the league in takeaways. Again, they finished 13-3, and they reached the Super Bowl.
Wilson toward the end zone. It is caught! Seattle's going to the Super Bowl. Jermaine Kearse. No safety in the middle of the field. They got one-on-one, no middle help. Jermaine Kearse takes the middle of the field. He beats Tramon Williams, and another perfectly thrown pass by Russell Wilson. When the game was on the line and you had to start making some plays, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, they made them. And as good as this Packers defense had been throughout the game for about 55 minutes, they couldn't make the stop on 3 straight possessions when they had to. And Seattle's moving on.
Which everybody thought was going to get delayed or canceled because there was a gigantic snowstorm coming into the East Coast. And this stadium was held in New York. And I got one of the tickets because they had started going on sale because nobody was willing to fly to the East Coast, Kev. And I picked up 2 tickets for like $1,600. And I got to be at the game. And the game is against Denver. Denver had the league's best offense. Peyton Manning is kind of at the peak. And unfortunately, the results are not close. If you remember the very first play, they run the ball back and score. And Denver doesn't score at all in the first half. By halftime, all you see is a league of orange walking out of the stadium. And I start wondering to myself, Kevin, if the only person to score for Denver that day might be a dancer that night. Seattle ends up winning 43-31. It was one of the most dominant Super Bowl performances ever. And I got to be there for my own team, my own state.
How have I known you for this long and I didn't know that you were at that Super Bowl? That's weird. We knew each other then. Anyways, the Seahawks are champions, and for a moment, man, it felt like they were unstoppable.
Manning has it knocked out of his hand. That's a live ball and recovered by Seattle. Either way, they were going to get it. It was knocked out by Clemens. And the Seahawks defense just keeps coming at. Dominant performance across the board. Pete Carroll, the Seahawks are world champs.
But there was another Super Bowl that happened not too far after that, Kevin. And that one was a little bit more awkward. Second down, right there to make the score, and they throw a pass on second down. It gets intercepted. This crushes the Seahawks.
Second and goal. Baldwin sets up on the left. Play clock at 5. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal. Malcolm Butler, who almost made the phenomenal play that wound up in Purse's arms. There are flags on the field for a celebration. Amazing.
Side note, one of my favorite, first of all, I always thought that Pete made the right call and that Russell did not execute. There's a book.
I think so, Kev.
There's a book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. It's one of my favorite books. And I remember when she starts the book off with that story, I remember thinking, finally, somebody else on this planet besides me believed the same thing. Nonetheless, please, I don't want to hear any chirping from you Seattle fans. I know Marshawn Lynch, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, the fallout totally fractured the team. Trust started to erode, and at that point, you're winning that much. You got guys getting paid big. Contracts start to loom. So the Legion, boom, slowly dissolves. Seattle remains competitive, but let's face it, the peak is gone at this point.
And like we mentioned, they lose that Super Bowl. So now what? What is Seattle going to do? The Seahawks, we're going to refuse to tank. We're going to refuse to disappear. We're going to reload. We're going to adapt. Russell Wilson eventually departs. Pete Carroll, for the time being, remains. And the team transitions once again, like all great teams.
Yeah. And the thing is, very few franchises survive like this many reinventions without a collapse, at least for a short period of time.
The Seahawks are not defined by constant dominance. They're defined by a belief. And their belief is demonstrated in noise, in their defense, in their culture.
Yeah, from an expansion anonymity to a championship powerhouse, the Seahawks built an identity that could just not be copied.
We are sitting weeks away from the next Super Bowl, of which Seattle once again is returning after a stellar year. They've been performing at their peak. And I'm excited to see our team show up in just a couple weeks to see who perseveres out of the Patriots or the Seahawks. I know my bet. I don't know who you're taking, Kevin.
Well, I'm just going to say this. I think I haven't literally bet yet, but I plan to. And most likely that money will be on Seattle.
What I love about football, imagine if somebody figured out a way for one team to always win, how bad the sport would be. The idea that teams have good years and bad years, and sometimes they win and sometimes they don't, is good for the sport. It keeps us excited and watching. And the true fans are there from the highs and then down to the lows. But what makes a great team really is the leadership, the coach, and then the person who leads from the field. So let's go back to April of 2018. We're at the NFL draft. This has become like a televised trial. Like, think of Judge Judy. Prospects are not evaluated quietly anymore. They're debated publicly, analyzed, criticized endlessly, and their futures are projected before they ever take a professional snap. And quarterbacks sit at the center of this machine. And near the top of the board in April of 2018 is a 20-year-old from Southern California with kind of a loose arm, an easy confidence, and a habit of making plays when structure breaks down. His name is Sam Darnold.
With the third pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Sam Darnold, quarterback, USC.
By the way, I propose, you just came up with this idea and I like it. I propose that Judge Judy from now on call all of the drafts in the first and second round for the NFL. Like, she should be the one. Screw Roger Goodell. Judge Judy. You should get on that.
Brilliant, Kevin.
I think so. Here's the deal about Darnold. The league, around him is reveling. Scouts do not say the word safe with him. They say natural. They say he's instinctive. They say Sam is resilient. One GM privately describes him as the quarterback you want when the play collapses. It sounds like a compliment, but like the fact is, and it kind of is, but it's also a warning, because the quarterbacks most praised for improvisation are often drafted by the teams that are already collapsing.
Darnold is not just evaluated as a player. He's evaluated as an answer, a fix, a reset button for a franchise that has cycled through quarterbacks for decades. And answers like this carry some weight. Sam Darnold arrives at, if we go back in time, at USC without any ceremony. He redshirts his first year in college. He develops quietly. He lifts weights. He learns the system. When injuries force him into the lineup in 2016, the response is immediate. He goes 9-3 as the starter for that season at USC.
Yeah, he leads USC to a Rose Bowl victory over Penn State in one of the most dramatic games in college football. USC came back from a 14-point deficit. Darnold threw for 453 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's astronomical, by the way. After that game, Penn State head coach says, that kid just kept coming. Nothing rattled him.
Across 2 seasons at USC, Darnold throws for over 4,100 yards, 57 touchdowns, and 22 interceptions. The interception number is noted, but mostly dismissed. Scouts frame it as aggression, as confidence. One evaluator said, you can coach decisions, you cannot coach courage.
By January 2018, Darnold declares for the NFL draft. He's 20 years old, younger than many of the rookies he's going to compete against. And that youth actually becomes part of the sales pitch for him.
Yeah, the New York Jets hold the 3rd overall pick. They trade up to get it. They do not hide their intention. They need a quarterback.
And when they select Sam Darnold, the reaction is immediate. Jerseys sell, headlines celebrate. Analysts call it a turning point. The Jets CEO, Christopher Johnson, says, we believe Sam can be the face of this franchise for a long time. Spoiler alert, he was wrong.
Darnold becomes the youngest week 1 starting quarterback in modern NFL history. At 21 years old, handed the offense immediately. There's no veteran bridge, no slow ramp, no buffer.
His first NFL pass, though, is intercepted and returned for a touchdown. It's a brutal introduction to the NFL. But Darnold responds by throwing 2 touchdown passes that same game. The Jets actually won. For a moment, their optimism spikes. And that's how expectations are born.
Over 3 seasons with the Jets, Darnold starts 38 games. He throws for 8,097 yards, 39 touchdowns, and 45 interceptions. The raw numbers are a little unforgiving.
Yeah, context matters, but context never survives, or at least rarely survives the headlines. 2018, the Jets ranked near the bottom of the league in pass protection. In 2019, Darnold misses games with mono, actually. When he returns against New England, the Jets are just overwhelmed. After the game, Darnold said on the sideline, "I'm seeing ghosts."
The quote becomes viral. It becomes shorthand. It becomes a label. Never mind that New England's defense that season ranked among the best of a decade. Never mind that Darnold is only 22 years old, but the narrative around him kind of becomes to harden.
Yeah, the Jets do what the Jets do. They cycle coaches, they change systems. Darnold has never been with the same offensive coordinator for 2 years in a row. And by 2020, the franchise is ready to reset again. And in the NFL, the reset rarely includes the quarterback who lived through the previous one.
The Carolina Panthers trade for Sam Darnold in April of 21. They believe he can be rehabbed. They believe the environment actually matters, and the early returns are promising.
Yeah, through the first 3 games, Carolina started 3-0. Darnold throws for like 5 touchdowns. He adds some rushing scores. The conversation shifts briefly, but kind of same thing. Protection collapses, injuries pile up, turnovers come back.
Darnold finishes the season with 2,527 passing yards, 9 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions. He gets benched, then reinserted, then sidelined. Another reset arrives, another clock runs out, and then again, it happens one more time. Sam Darnold signs with the San Francisco 49ers as a backup. And the move is pretty quiet, almost invisible. No press conferences, no expectations, no savior language.
Yeah, I think this was so good for him. He got the chance to study under Kyle Shanahan's system. He's watching this Brock Purdy, right? And Brock Purdy's executing with just precision. So he starts to learn what stability looks like. He later reflected, you learn so much. You learn how much easier the position gets when the structure works.
Yeah. He appears very limited and gets a very small amount of action. The league mostly forgets him, but something important eventually happens. The pressure lifts. And in 2024, the Minnesota Vikings sign Sam Darnold. The move is framed as insurance, a bridge, depth.
Sam Darnold's time in San Francisco, limited action, sounds like my high school years.
And your adult years.
But, hey, he's in Minnesota now, right? And he gets the chance again. He earns the starting role. This time surrounded by a strong receiving group, a defined offensive system. And what happens? He plays differently. He throws with a little more restraint. He takes checkdowns. He protects the football better.
Yeah, his passer ratings starts to climb. His interception rate starts to drop. Coaches are praising his command. One of the Viking staff says privately, he's not trying to prove he belongs anymore. He actually knows that he does.
Yeah, Sam's career mirrors a broader truth about the NFL, Ben. Quarterbacks are drafted into chaos and judged when they can't fix it immediately.
Yeah, former general manager says, we don't ruin quarterbacks, we rush them. And Darnold survives long enough, I guess, to test that theory, because here's the final turn of the story today. It's the 2025 season. Sam Darnold is no longer some project. He's actually a veteran. He understands protections. He understands leverage. He understands what he can and cannot do.
Yeah, and now the team around him is built to compete. The system is familiar. Expectations are realistic. Darnold plays the most efficient football of his career. Throws fewer interceptions before. He finishes the regular season with career highs in completion percentage and third down efficiency.
But now, Kevin, he's no longer playing for Minnesota. Who's he playing for?
Yeah, he's playing for that team up there in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Where tans rarely exist and Super Bowls are not that common. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, the Seahawks, we're going to the Super Bowl. The team wins 12 games. They win the playoffs. And now the conversation is shifting because in February of 2026, Sam Darnold is no longer a headline about what went wrong. He's a case study of don't underestimate the wrong person. Because sometimes it takes time for that person to evolve and show up. With a little bit of patience, we see what can be created.
I think we also see what happens when you've got great coaching and you combine those things of a player developing, the right coach and system comes along, and all of a sudden you got Sam Darnold, who looked like a bust just a couple years ago. Dude's leading his team to the Super Bowl. I mean, that's really not bad.
No, I mean, drafted in 2018 for the New York Jets, where he played through 2020, Carolina Panthers from 21 to 22, 49ers in 23, the Vikings in 24, and then he finally came home to where he's truly appreciated, cheered, and supported, to the Seahawks, where he gets his first chance to play as a starting quarterback in the Super Bowl. We will see in just a couple weeks who ends up becoming the quarterback for the 25-26 season. Is it going to be the Patriots with Drake May? Or is it going to be the Seattle Seahawks with Sam Darnold? You might want to hear now that this is part one of the two-part series, because on the next episode, Cardboard Wars, with Kevin Rips and Ben Ripping, we are going to talk about the history of one of the most loved and hated teams of all time, the New England Patriots, and a newer quarterback, Drake May. You excited for that one, Kev?
Yeah, I'm no Patriots fan by any stretch of the imagination, but that kid, Drake May, I believe he's special. I believe he's a stud. This was not a fluke. And I think we're going to be talking about him for a long time to come.
Somebody's betting on Sam Darnold if we get back to the card game, for all you nerdy collectors out there, because one of his most valuable card just sold yesterday, I think. One of one NFL Shield logo jersey patch. Looks like National Treasures. No, Flawless. Just sold for $15,000. A gold Kaboom has sold for as high of $10,300. And a few other cards in that 10,000 range. So if you're thinking about owning a future star quarterback, if you believe he can stick in the game, this might be one of those guys that that you could go pick up early and see if he turns into something. Drake May prices have already gone a little crazy. I picked up one of his 101s the other day. So we'll see in the card world, Kevin, what happens with Darnold's cards after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would be interested. I'm going to save the search and come back and take a look at it because if the Seahawks do win, I got to imagine we're going to see a spike in some more high end, in this $10,000 plus range of Sam Darnold cards is my guess.
Sam Darnold, when he was at USC, said, "I've always believed if you stay aggressive, good things happen." After being drafted by the Jets, he said, "I'm ready to work. I know where I'm at. I know what's expected." He's had a different type of story. He's been with quite a few teams. Let's hope he sticks it out with Seattle for a while for my own team's sake. Ladies and gentlemen, do us a favor. If you've listened this far, give us a review. Go onto YouTube and write a couple comments. We've been trying to pick some people every single week and send some custom Cardboard Wars swag to. We've broached over 2.5 million listens on YouTube and over 80,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. Give Kevin Rips a follow on Instagram and Ben Rippin on Instagram, and we will see you on part 2 of the 2026 Super Bowl Cardboard Wars special.
Thanks for listening to Cardboard Wars on the Rippin' Podcast Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review and check out rippin.com to get connected to what we have coming up. Find us on Instagram and let us know what you would like to hear about on a future episode of Cardboard Wars. Until next time, keep ripping.